Ever found yourself counting the days post-peak, eagerly anticipating the chance of taking a pregnancy test? Or wrestling with frustration and anger during a period of abstinence? We've all been there, and we're all currently there, navigating the dance between getting what we want right now and waiting. So here's a thought to kick things off. How do we embrace patience as a gift, a stepping stone to holiness, rather than a burden? Stick around as we explore the art of patience, unravel its connections to our spiritual and emotional well-being, and talk about some practical tips to make the waiting game a little bit more bearable. Ready to dive in? Welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we are expanding the conversation around Catholic sexuality. My name is Ellen Holloway, and I am a Catholic speaker and coach who specializes in sex and marital intimacy, and I am the host of this podcast. Today, we are talking about practicing patience. Before we jump into the topic, I want to thank the Given Institute for sponsoring this week's episode. The Given Institute is a not-for-profit organization dedicated to activating the gifts of women for the church and the world. Through leadership training, faith formation, and dedicated mentoring, Given forms women for mission and for life. Applications are now open for Given's 2024 cohort. I was a member of the 2022 Given cohort, and I used that year of mentoring to launch my marriage prep program called NFP Basics. It was an unforgettable experience that helped me shape not only my project, but my business as a whole. Given's year-long program includes attendance at the Catholic Young Women's Leadership Forum on June 8th through the 12th, 2024 at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., and one-on-one mentorship in the Art of Accompaniment mentorship program until May of 2025. The forum is an amazing opportunity to connect with so many incredible women, religious, lay, single, married, young, experienced, and everything in between. I loved getting the chance to meet so many accomplished and holy women. I brought my 9-month-old son along, and there were so many sisters who were eager to hold him and take care of him for me. So if you're thinking this might be for you, except you'll have a little nursing baby at the time, I'm here to tell you that it is possible. Applications are now open for women 21 to 35 seeking leadership training, faith formation, community, and support. Also accepting applications for lay and consecrated mentors and event volunteers. Honestly, if it wasn't literally across the country for me, I would be there again next year as a volunteer. For more information and to apply, visit giveninstitute.com/forum or click the link in the show notes. And now let's get to the topic. I wanted to title this episode something like Patience is a Virtue. No, really, it is. But technically, our church talks about patience as a fruit of the Spirit. So that might have not technically been theologically correct. Something that I love that St. Thomas Aquinas says is that patience is a virtue attached to the virtue of fortitude. And what is fortitude? So from the Catechism, paragraph 1808, fortitude is the moral virtue that ensures firmness in difficulties and constancy in the pursuit of the good. And I can really see what St. Thomas means here, that patience is attached to fortitude. Staying constant in something, holding strong, it often takes a lot of patience. I see the need to practice patience come up in two very obvious places. So the first is if a couple is avoiding pregnancy, waiting until that fertile window has closed is a great time of practicing patience. And then the other place that I see this come up a lot is in that 2-week wait before being able to take a pregnancy test. A lot of times we fight this practice of patience. Has it been enough days past peak? Can I take a pregnancy test today? Maybe first thing in the morning? Is 8 days post peak too soon to take a pregnancy test? Hey, I've been there. I've taken my fair share of 8 days post peak pregnancy tests. And let me tell you, it's a little too early. Or maybe on the flip side, getting frustrated or even angry at NFP protocol for requiring us to exercise self-control and patiently wait to come together with our spouse because we have determined that we're avoiding pregnancy at this time. Before we go into talking about some specific tips for practicing patience, especially when it has to do with sex and intimacy, I want to talk about labor and delivery pain management. I promise this relates. A lot of you who listen to the podcast here have given birth before, but for those of you who haven't, one of the things that is often taught in labor and delivery classes is that the pain of labor feels more intense and is harder to experience if you fight the pain. It's actually easier and feels less intense if you simply allow the pain of labor to wash over you. I remember the example in my labor and delivery class was to think about stubbing your toe. If you stub your toe and then immediately clench up, the pain is excruciating. Like, it's ridiculous that stubbing your toe hurts that much. You might scream, yell, jump around. I mean, it just really hurts. But if you stub your toe and you simply just let the pain wash over you, it actually feels less painful. And the experience is quicker, it's less intense, and let's be honest, your reaction is a lot quieter. The same goes then for labor and delivery pain. They recommend moaning in low voices rather than screaming in a high-pitched voice. When you scream, you tense up. When you moan in low voices, you are allowing the pain to wash over you because you're staying open. You're not tensing up. If you've listened to the podcast for any amount of time, you know how much I love theology of the body. And one of the things that John Paul II's theology of the body teaches us is that the biological informs the theological. Biological realities can help us understand theological realities. So if physical pain is managed better by allowing it to just kind of wash over us, the same goes for emotional and spiritual pain or painful events in the emotional and spiritual realm. When we allow spiritual hardships to wash over us, they are more easily managed. And patience is a perfect example of a spiritual hardship. It can truly be a pain to practice patience. It can also be so hard that it might even physically hurt. And when the patience also coincides with something we really want physically, like sex or being pregnant, we can feel it even deeper inside of us. But when we fight against that pain of practicing patience, it gets harder. The hours feel like days, the days feel like months. When we get frustrated to the point of being angry, that is fighting against the pain. That anger is the same as tensing up when you stub your toe or screaming in a high voice during labor. Getting angry only makes practicing patience even harder. And in my other example, when we constantly check the calendar if it's been enough days that we can take a pregnancy test, or we let the possibility of being pregnant be the only thing we think about for those 2 weeks, we're doing the same thing. We're tensing up. We're not letting the pain of experiencing and practicing patience to wash over us. And yes, it is painful. It is a pain that we are experiencing. So what do we do? How do we practice the pain of patience well? I am going to caution you that as you get better at practicing patience, you'll likely get even more opportunities to practice patience. I do say that jokingly, but that's actually a really good thing because patience is a virtue. And what is practicing virtue? It's growing in holiness. These opportunities that we regularly have in marriage and in our sex life to practice patience are God's incredible gifts to us. They allow us to grow in holiness. These times of practicing patience are stepping stones to heaven. But only if we actually allow them to be stepping stones to heaven. If we fight against practicing patience at every step by constantly being angry that we have to abstain or obsessing over that 2-week wait, we're not actually growing in holiness. We're letting the enemy win. Anger and obsession can be vices. And this is something that you need to take to heart and honestly assess in yourself, in your relationship with your husband, as well as, your opinion of NFP or fertility in general. I hear from you guys a lot about how hard it is to be patient and why did God set it up this way? Or even worse, I hear things like, God would never want me to feel this way. He understands if I do something else because he'd never want me to feel this much pain. When you are up on the cross, when you are dying to yourself, the enemy's words sound mighty tempting. Of course, it's going to sound like the voice of God to tell you to get down from that cross, because being on the cross is hard. Growing in holiness is hard. But Jesus did not get down from the cross, even though he had the power to do so. He is our example. So we must accept patience into our lives and let it wash over us. See, we can see opportunities to practice patience with joy because we know it is another opportunity that God is giving to us to die to self and grow in holiness. Thank you, God. That's amazing. Practically, though, what does this actually look like? It's really going to look different for every person. If you are in that 2-week wait and you regularly are the type of person who takes the pregnancy test on day 8, make a goal for yourself to wait until day 12 and ask God to help ease your mind. Find holy distractions like holy hours, novenas, housework, checking in on friends or relatives, researching new recipes to feed your family, spending extra time with your husband or your kids, make a meal for a family near you who needs it, or maybe just for no reason at all. But if you're looking for distractions, make sure that they are holy ones. Remember, we are trying to grow in holiness here. Scrolling Instagram or watching Gilmore Girls is not really going to help you grow in holiness. Find distractions that help you in being a gift of yourself. If you're the type that gets frustrated to the point of anger during the fertile window, my biggest suggestion would be to really ask yourself, why? Where is this anger coming from? What are your reasons for avoiding pregnancy? Is this possibly an indication that it's time to reassess your discernment of baby spacing? Is this an indication of needing to practice the virtues of temperance and self-control in addition to patience? Prayer is huge when it comes to anger, and it's okay if it's an angry prayer. God wants you, not who you think you should be for God to want you. Novenas can be really good here because that can take up a huge chunk of your period of abstinence. Holy distractions, like I mentioned before, are also really helpful. Are there chores you can do around the house? Or maybe you can spend that time reading a book or taking a course to strengthen your marriage and intimacy in ways other than sex. But I think the key, whenever anger comes into the picture with patience, is digging into where that anger is really coming from and finding the root, not just the surface level reason you're angry. Because I can guarantee you that you're not actually angry at the science of fertility awareness or the fertility cycle of women. You're likely angry at something much deeper than that, like the difficulty of practicing abstinence. Maybe you're angry at a situation that feels very unfair. Maybe you're feeling abandoned by God. Those are just a few examples, but those are valid reasons to feel angry. And what you need to do is take those to prayer. So in closing, and I know this episode is a little on the shorter side, I'm testing out some things for you guys. So please feel free to let me know what you think of this shorter style of episode. I really wanted to just focus and dig in on one small aspect. And so here's what I want you to really remember and take away from this episode. It's important to think about patience as something that we practice to grow in holiness. It's not a burden. It's something good. Patience is really a great thing to experience because we know that it helps us get just one tiny step closer to heaven. We can rejoice in the annoyingness of needing to practice patience. And also remember that holy distractions can really help us in practicing patience. And distracting ourselves is not a bad thing, so long as we are distracting ourselves in a way that helps us to grow in holiness. And the best way to do that is to be a gift of self. That's what loving another is being a gift of yourself to that person and willing their good. And so things like supporting a friend or family member or focusing on prayer, those are ways that we can be a gift of ourself, but also kind of distract ourselves from the difficulty of practicing patience. Thanks so much for listening. If you are not already following us on Instagram, be sure to check us out at Charting Toward Intimacy. And if you listen to podcasts on a platform that gives you the option to rate or review, we'd love for you to do that because it helps us spread the word about the podcast. If you ever have questions, comments, or episode topic ideas, please reach out to us. We love to hear from you. You can reach out on Instagram or send us an email. Our email is in the show notes. Until next time.